Hey everyone, this is Maggie, coming at you live, sort of, from my coronavirus crib. Yes, hear that right. Um, I've had coronavirus for the past week or so. 0 to 10, don't recommend. Please socially distance so then you don't get it if you haven't already. And yeah, and to personally apologize to all my students. Sorry I haven't really answered your emails or graded your assignments as of recent, because I was laying in bed thinking I was going to die of a novel virus, but here I am, alive and wellish to teach you CSS part 3. But anyways, before getting started, just some reminders on just the general gist of labs. At the start of every lab, and I definitely do recommend it for this one at least, to have the slides downloaded and ready to go. Because at least for today, you'll have some links that you'll need to click on and whatnot. And then after you're done for today, drag any file that you've been working on that was on your local desktop onto WinSCP or CyberDuck. This will include just anything from your HTML files, your CSS files, and even your images that you've been working with. And when you're done, please make sure to check your global links, like your pages.iu.edu links, to see that everything that you intended it to look like on the local side has carried over to the global side, because that will not be a valid excuse if you get dock points on just things not looking the way you intended to. And also make sure to have any programs that you need for today open. So that basically just means Notepad++ and Atom today. And after you're done, WinSCP or CyberDuck. And if, again, you live off campus and don't use the IU Secure Wi-Fi, then please use Pulse Secure. But just to get an overview on today's lab, spoiler alert, it's going to be a little exciting. We're going to learn a lot of new content, but it will all go towards making our website so much prettier and towards our larger projects and stuff like that. And we'll actually be using outside resources and documentation to implement really cool stuff like navigation bars, and with the skeleton framework, we'll be using someone else's CSS page essentially to lay out and organize our websites a little bit better. And when we're using these outside resources and documentation, this is a really good stepping stone on how to really learn CSS and HTML by yourself without the instructions of us in the class going forward in the future. But yeah, so to get started, open Notepad++ or Atom, and we're going to create a HTML file with that basic HTML skeleton and call that css3.html. So again, as the directions have stated, HTML, that's always the beginning of our HTML skeleton, basically telling this file that it is an HTML file, spoiler alerts. And afterwards, we'll create the head, which is where all the metadata, anything that describes the file itself, will live, such as the title, CSS3 as per usual. And then outside of the head, we'll have the body tags. And we don't need to put any actual content yet, but after you're done typing this basic skeleton right here, just go to File, Save As, and inside your I101 folder, which is taking a minute to pop up, you're going to call it css3.html. Okay. And then afterwards, we're also going to create a CSS page for this HTML web page that we've made, and call it css3.css. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna press Command N or Control N if you're on a Windows computer, or you could also just go to File and New File right there. And we don't need to add any actual content in yet, but go Save As and name this file css3.css. And make sure that both this and your HTML file for today are in your I101 folder. Afterwards, css3.css, hit save, and we're all prepped up for today's lesson. All right, so our first new content of the day is just learning how to make a navigation bar. And the way that we'll be doing this is through the use of this documentation provided by W3 Schools. Definitely do recommend it. It's a really good resource to have, but if you just go to this link below in the slides, if you have it downloaded already, it should take you to this website. That's not it. If you go to this link provided in the lab slides, it should take you to this nifty, handy dandy documentation that will walk us through on how to create a navigation bar. And a navigation bar is just gonna look super cool on your website. It's like a hallmark of just any website, and especially when you have to create a larger website with multiple web pages to navigate through, it'll just be really important. So as the slide states right here, if you notice the documentation in W3 Schools, it first tells you on how to get started on a navigation bar. So basically, a navigation bar, before you even start to make it look like a navigation bar, needs that HTML as a base to actually, like, you know, have as a jumping off point. And essentially how you're going to start off with your navigation bar is creating a list of hyperlinks of which you want the navigation bar to be of. So here's like an example of that right here, of your of all your navigation bar items, using an unordered list. And the example in the slides can also do an OL list if you'd like, but for the purposes of this class, I'll just use a UL list, an unordered list. So first, on your HTML document, got to skirt back a little bit for a hot second. I forgot to connect the CSS page to the HTML page. So before we can actually move on to the actual lab, we have to make sure that this HTML file is connected to our CSS file. And again, it's just through a helpful link tag in your head tag. So like just anywhere inside your head tag, you're going to create a link between your CSS file and your HTML. So through this link tag where it has these two HTML attributes. First is the rel for relationship, to specify that this link relationship is just basically you connecting a style sheet to this given HTML file. And then afterwards, you're going to create the actual hyperlink reference, like the actual link to the file through, again, the hyperlink reference attribute, css3.css. And then I think that should be it. And now we can actually get started on the list. So again, you can just do an ordered list or an unordered list, as I am doing right now. as long as at the end of the day it is a list, because it doesn't really matter because we're going to take out all the decorations for a list and just format it as such through CSS. So remember, it's a list of hyperlinks. So after creating that LI tag, you're going to create a anchor tag for your hyperlink. And for the purposes of this class, I'm just gonna create hyperlinks to other files from I101, like our index, for example, our index page. And remember that after closing out your anchor tag, also close out your LI, your list item tag for that respective bullet point. And html1.html. And just one more, I'll create a tag, a link, to HTML2. All right, so after you're done creating this list right here, try opening this on your favorite browser, preferably Google Chrome, but can't stop you there. And opening it, at first, you should just see a basic list. But yeah. All right, so actually moving on to styling our nav bar to make it look like an actual nav bar. If you go along further in the documentation, it should tell you up next that we're going to start going into the UL tag in our CSS page as our selector, and we're going to edit it so that we're removing the bullet points and making like all the margins and padding for the list a 0. So going into your CSS page this time on either Notepad++ or Atom, go and click on that. And using UL as your selector, we're going to, again, remove the bullet item by using the property name list style type, set that equal to none, and with margins and padding, set that equal to both 0. And then afterwards, go back to your file, your CSS3 file on your browser, and refresh it. And now you should see that there's no really padding margins for this list right now, and the bullet points have been removed. But yeah, and before really moving on, if you guys or if like any of you just didn't get this to work, try and check back and see if this link is correct. Double check also, sorry, that the list style types are, all the like property names are right. The syntax is there, like the way you typed it, like the syntax is all there. Make sure everything is closed from the brackets right here to the semicolons to your list items and whatnot. But yeah, to move on. So as the slide states, when you go to the next page of the documentation, in our W3 schools page right here, it'll tell you what you'll need to do next in a hot second, of course, because my Wi-Fi sucks. All right, here. Yeah, so the next thing we'll be doing is to edit the anchor tag, anchor tag elements within that list. And the way to do that is in our selector items, after saying li, saying we want to edit list items, we want to say we want to edit all the anchor tags within the list item tags. And the properties that we'll be working with are display and width. And what display does, as it explains right here, is that it just basically displays the whole links themselves as like a block element, and basically just make that whole area a little bit clickable and not just like the text itself. This is to create that effect you'll see up at the top right here, where you can just click on just this whole entire thing itself instead of just the text on its own, which will give you that more bar menu bar look. And with the width, what it does is that it allows the block elements to take up the full width available just by default, and we want to specify that it will be having the width of 60 pixels. So going back to Atom with CSS3, underneath that UL rule, we're going to create a new rule for our list item anchor tags. So li, then space A, just to get even more specific about what we want to change. And we're going to create our displays as block elements. Again, just so then whenever we click on that entire block itself, it's going to actually like be able to work, like you can click on it instead of just like the text. And have the width be 60 pixels. So yeah, and after all that jazz, we're going to hit save and then refresh and check up on our CSS. So now, if you can kind of subtly see, you don't even need to like click on the actual like text itself, as you can see with index, like over here in this little white space, and that's what the block display is doing. And with our 60 pixel width, it just makes sure that every one of these, no matter how small or big like the actual like text is, it's gonna have all the blocks will be like the same size, which will be a lot better visualized when we start adding color to it. So going further on in our documentation page, I'm going to add some more stylings to make the pages stand out and add more color to it. We're going to add the following based on the documentation, such as background color, text decoration, and then we're also going to edit how like the hover thing behaves when you go hover over a link. So as it says, follow the documentation, as it states right there. A little bit more below, please. Yeah, right there. So under our UL tag, we're going to add a little bit more content to it. We're going to add a 200 pixel width, just again to make the navigation bar look a little bit thicker, like long ways. And we're going to add a background color. And you don't necessarily have to follow this color in general. You can do whatever it is you want, but just try to change the background color for this UL, this unordered list rule. So again, width, we're going to make it 200 pixels, and we're going to add a background color to it. And personally, I'm just a huge fan of turquoise, so I'm gonna figure out how to spell this. Oh, there we go. And have that as our background color. And in addition to adding more stuff to our UL unordered list rule. We're going to add just a single, well, if you want, you could also do this. We're going to add color, some padding, as well as text decoration for our LI anchor tags. So if you remember from a previous class, text decoration allows you to get rid of things such as like the underline things. Personally, I am not a fan of these underlines, so that would be really nice. So underneath our LI rule right here, you can get rid of this width now, just again to follow along and see like just like to follow along with like the documentation. Underneath the display, create a color for your, like a font color for your text. And I'll just go with white in this case. And then afterwards, create a padding of 8 pixels by 16 pixels. It's just so then like the top and like the top and right parts have like a little bit of space with the text and the borders. So yeah, 8 pixels, 16 pixels. And then afterwards, text decoration will be none. And then finally, the last thing we'll be editing is what our links will look like when we hover over them. So first, you have to have the selector and have that set to LIA colon hover, which we kind of briefly like explained a little bit in CSS 2 or 1, I can't remember. But yeah, LIA and then colon hover. And within these brackets, we're just going to edit how the background color will change. And it's already white whenever I click on it. So you just change it, the background color to, I'm gonna say pink. But you could do whatever color it is you want. So after having all of this, all these new changes on your CSS page, go back to your browser onto your CSS page and refresh that. And now you should see that this navigation bar looks very similar to the one they provided for us in the documentation right here. Yay, nifty. Definitely leveled up our web pages just a smidge. But yeah, and if you ever wanted to learn how to make a horizontal menu as opposed to a vertical one that we did, you can look at the documentation page again. If you just go to the next page or just click on horizontal nav bar, like right here. But for this class, we're not really going to walk through how to do a horizontal nav bar, but if you ever wanted to learn how to do that, here is the way to do it. So yeah. And before we really move on to our next new content, we're going to talk a little bit about debugging. So HTML and general coding can sometimes like involve a little bit of process, like of trial and error and stuff like that. We're not perfect. We're bound to make mistakes. I have certainly. Though, I was doing this lesson recording earlier and I couldn't even figure out why my code wasn't working. It was just the way I was linking my HTML and CSS pages. So even your UIs will make mistakes, but if you know how to properly debug, then that just makes you all the better of a coder. So when coding, it's again just perfectly fine for the things to not work correctly, as long as you just like know how to troubleshoot, like solve the problem. Best ways to do that again is just like look for common errors, such as looking for any missing or mistyped tags or classes. I've told you like a couple times and to a couple of my students about like how cool it is to check on Atom and Notepad++ of where to check for like the start and end of an HTML tag. So that's like a good way to troubleshoot yourself. Another great like mindset to have whenever you're trying to troubleshoot something and solve like a problem is to try to isolate your problems to just like a few lines of code, and you can do that by commenting out like a couple lines of code. So comments are basically like what they are, like what the name states. They're like, they can be used for comments. Like you can write them on your HTML or CSS and it won't be read as code. They're good for notes, but they're also good for like temporarily like canceling out like lines of your code to check and see if like something's not working, or if you just want to temporarily like take something out of your code. So there are different ways depending on whichever language and program that you're using to comment things out. In HTML, this is how you would do it. At the start of when you want to comment things out, you do this little caret, exclamation points, and then 2 dashes. So say if I want to take away the link to my index page because I need to like edit it for some whatever reason, this is how you would edit it out. So the caret, exclamation point, dash, dash, and notice how it cancels out, it like kind of fades away the rest of my HTML page. The reason why is because there's like, you can actually comment out multiple lines of code with this method, but the way to end like where you want to stop commenting is by doing dash dash and then caret. So yeah, that's how you comment things out in HTML. If you want to see for yourself, this is now what would happen with that new comment out thingy that I just did. So yeah, commenting out, it's good for like multiple things. And then in CSS, this is the way to do it. Again, like it's kind of similar to HTML, where in between your lines of code that you want to comment out, you put in the slash pound? No, pound is the little star thing, the little slash star thing. And then to end your comment out thing in CSS is by doing the star slash. And you can also just Google, like in addition to just like commenting out like lines of your code to like isolate the problem and looking for common errors, you can also Google things. Of course, like not for like exact answers, like not to cheat or anything, but just to like figure out solutions for your problem. You can Google it. Stack Overflow is like really good for that kind of purpose. And if you have any problems like understanding any of the tags or like properties or documentations that we've done today so far, now's like a really good time to ask not just me, but your respective lab instructors and stuff like that. But debugging rant done. On to the next content. So the last thing we're going to be really learning today outside of navigation bars is this new thing called the skeleton framework. So yeah, now that we've gotten our feet wet a little bit in documentation, we're going to kick it up a notch. And so yeah, and often in programming, we may want to like use another person's code or work in order to save us on time, because already like we don't really need to invent the wheel or anything unless that's what you're trying to do. But most of the time, we're just trying to work with something that already has been proven to work. So as long as we like properly like attribute the author and they allow us to use their work, then we have that green light to utilize their work. So today we're going to be utilizing someone else's CSS code and implement it within our HTML. And that, whenever it's someone else's CSS code, it's called a framework. And the framework that we'll be using today is called the skeleton framework. Not to be confused with the basic HTML skeleton, this is completely different. It is skeleton framework, TM, with a capital S. But before we can really start implementing our skeleton framework, let's go at least look at the documentation. So if you were to go to this link right here, getskeleton.com, it should take you to this handy dandy little documentation site that basically tells you all the nice little capabilities that you can do with this specific framework. So the thing that we'll be focusing on the most in this class is this thing called the skeleton grid. Basically what it does is kind of similar to a table, basically, like we did in like CSS1. We can like separate, divide up our content like into different rows. So say if you'd want this different like element in your HTML on a new line, you can easily do that. And then if you want to have like multiple things on the same row but separate-ish, you can do that as well within these different columns. And within these columns, you can have them be different sizes, take up different different amount of spaces within each row. And then at the bottom of each little like examples, it provides you like little documentations, like a little tutorial basically on how to implement what you see right up there. And it goes on a little bit further, but if you ever want to learn more about what this thing can do, there's that right, yep. But again, we're going to mostly be focusing on this grid. And if you go to more and license, you can see like all the different people who are contributing to this CSS page on GitHub. And yeah, so basically a lot of these people spent countless hours implementing this and making this possible for all of us. So going into this lab at some point, we're going to properly attribute them and thank them for all their hard work. All right, so we can actually get started now on implementing the skeleton framework. So before like we can actually code any of like the capabilities that this website is telling us that we could do the skeleton framework, we have to first link it onto our HTML page, like reference it so that we can actually like use those specific class names that they've made up of like and stuff like that, and these specific like functions. And the way to do that is through that link reference like we've done before with all of our CSS pages, except this time instead of like saying css3.css, we're going to be using this specific link right here. So just if you have the slides pulled up, now's a really good time to have them pulled up, FYI. Go and copy this link right here, just that link. And we're going to type that link reference in our css3.html page. And just like the line before, we're trying to create a style link, a style sheet link relationship. But for the href, the hyperlink reference this time, it's going to be that specific link right there that they've provided for us in the slides. And when you check that, I already checked it earlier, but when you like check the new changes, sorry, that you, once you link this page, it's already gonna affect your web page in these following ways right here, because in the documentation explains to us like that they have used a different typography base than like the default HTML one. So already we're seeing changes with that new link. And again, like if it's not working for you right now, check this link right here, and please don't like copy like directly from the slides right here outside of this specific like href link right here, because the quotes will break your code actually on the slides. Just to give you that 411. But yeah, so moving on, if you look back at the documentation for the skeleton grid, you'll see that they are using these div tags. Sorry, I gotta bring that over. Like you'll see that in order to use the grid, they're using these div tags that we've used in a previous class, and within each div tag, they're using a custom class name that they created for us. So as you can see, like they're using class names like row for each row, and within each of these rows, again, it's going to sound really similar to table tags, like how that syntax and logic works. So within each row, it's going to have these div tags inside of these div tags, but this time with a column class name. And before saying like columns, we're going to have a number preceding it, and that number represents how much room will take up within that respective row. And how this framework works specifically is that you can have as many columns as you want within a row, like you see right here, but they've only done 2 in this given example. But you can have as many rows as you want, as long as all together these columns add up to 12. So you can see right here, 1 plus 11 is 12, 2 plus 10 is also 12. So you can have like as many like columns as you want with varying sizes, as long as all together those number of columns add up to 12. And it just takes up however much room it needs per row. But yeah, so just to explain, kind of already explained that, whoopsies, spoiler alerts. But we can get started now. So if you again look at the documentation before we start adding rows, it has to all like, in order to actually like make this work, all of our like rows and columns are contained inside these container div tags. It's kind of like our table tag in this context, where it wraps everything that we want to format, in this case, like inside like this like container class. Within the containers, there's rows, and within each rows is these columns. So first, we're going to create that container. I think that's what it wants me to do. Yes, it does. So, alrighty, we're going to first create our container. So create a div tag and give it a class name of container. And before we really move on to creating our rows or columns, it's a really good idea, especially when, in this case, this lab kind of gets confusing a little bit when you're working with so many div tags. Like, it just is a good idea to close out this div tag for the container now, sooner rather than later. So yeah. And within the div, the container, we're going to create our rows now. Let's see. And within each row, we're going to create these two columns that are going to be in equal size to each other. So they're going to both be 6 columns long. 6 plus 6 is 12. So we can get started on doing that. So this is going to be our first row within our website like layering, basically. So both of these elements will be like right next to each other when we like see this in code, like in application. So after creating our container div class, and you can see right here that it's being closed down here, we're going to create a new div tag inside of this called, and give it like the class name of row. And again, before we move on to creating the columns within the row, please just try to like close that row tag before moving on to the columns. So afterwards, we're going to create our columns now. We're going to create 2 and have them be of equal size. So afterwards, create a div and give it the class name of 6 columns. And you can just say whatever content you want in there. And the example just says hello there. So I'll just do that. And afterwards, sorry, before moving on to the next div class, make sure you're closing out the div tag for this class right here. And we're also going to give it the same name of 6 columns. It's fine that it's not unique because it's kind of like the class to like that skeleton will recognize as like one of the columns for your rows. So afterwards, creating this, add whatever other content you want within that second column. And before we really go and save and check this code out on our browser, please like try again, like just double check that this is working, like this link, but already we should have checked that. And then make sure that everything here is being closed, like you see right here, the container is closed down here, the row is being closed down there, and both of these columns are also closed. So just again, just make sure that everything is closed before really like refreshing the page on Chrome. So assuming that it works, you should see that now the 2 like contents that we've added inside of our columns should be right next to each other, and it's a little bit hard to see it without any borders around, but they take up equal space within our row. And yeah, so columns, again, I mentioned any, like you can have as many columns as you want, as long as and as like of any size you want, as long as altogether the columns add up to 12. The larger the number, the more space it'll take up within your row. And to do it on your own, or at least I can give you like a little bit of a gentle push towards doing that, you can create a new row within our container and add whatever columns you'd like. And now is a good time to look back at your documentation and ask your UI to make sure that you understand how these classes work. Some common mistakes that we've noticed throughout the years with the skeleton framework is how the row should be nested inside just the container, and there should be no rows within columns or other rows. So for example, like don't just create a new div class row inside your row like you see right here. It's gonna make your table, like not your table, but like your web page look a little bit jumbly. Just fair warning. And make sure, again, like I just showed you how to do that. Make sure that all your divs are closed, and yeah, and make sure, yeah, I think I addressed a lot of like that went on. But yeah, so moving on, we're going to dive in a little bit further with the skeleton framework, and hopefully then we can start seeing more of what we can do with this framework. And ironically, we're going to do that through the use of custom CSS classes. So in addition to adding someone, in addition to using like that skeleton framework, we're still going to be using our own CSS classes, but adding like someone else's CSS can just save us up on a lot of time, and it's like a really great way to like just again like use a tried and proven way of like coding, because in the past we had to manually like adjust where we wanted things to be on our like CSS web pages, and like let me tell you, that's like really annoying to do manually. But in HTML, fun fact, each tag can have more than just one class. We can demonstrate this through the use of our custom CSS classes such as Dumbledore and Riddle to our HTML pages, and add further instructions in our CSS. So going back into our HTML page, we're going to add the Riddle and Dumbledore classes to our columns. So again, going back to Atom or Notepad++, in each of these columns you see right here, after columns, we're going to add a new, like, our custom like CSS class names, like for us only, that isn't like something used by Skeleton Framework. And we'll name the first one Riddle, and then the second one Dumbledore, and make sure that these have spaces in between that, so then like the skeleton framework won't get like confused and think that like, oh, I don't see a 6 columns, I see 6 columns Riddle. Yeah, so just to get started on that, and afterwards, blah, blah, blah. Again, like these container row and column tags are just all CSS classes from the skeleton framework that we've been using today. And the ones highlighted in yellow, so the Riddle and Dumbledore classes that I mentioned earlier, they are going to be our custom CSS classes that we'll be editing on css3.css. So speaking of her, we're going to add some new rules to that. So in our css3.css, we're going to change the way those 2 div tags look. So don't know if they specified how they wanted it to look like, but oh yeah, they do. So but before we do that, go into the CSS page and do dot and then Riddle, because we always do dots after a class name because it's like a custom one instead of just like a generic HTML tag. And as the slide states, it wants us to give the Riddle class a border style of double. I don't think we've ever done this in this class yet, so you'll get to see what that looks like. And then give it a border width of 2 pixels and a border color of green. These are 3 different property names. However, in this class, there is a way to combine all these 3 rules under that generic border property name. So, which I'll do in a short bit. So border, and the order of like the different property names for your borders, first goes the width, 2 pixels, and then it might be color, and then double. So 2 pixel green double. And before we move on to the Dumbledore class, how about we just save this first and see what that looks like. All right, so now you can kind of start seeing like the visualization of this skeleton grid right here. Like it's starting to look a little bit more like what you see right here. Specifically, if you look at the 6x6 like row columns, and since we only edited the riddle class, it's only affecting whichever columns have this riddle class right here. If we were to have just done like columns, it would have affected both the Dumbledore and the Riddle classes. So yeah, and after we're done with that, we can create a new different rule for the Dumbledore class. And for this one, it's gonna want us to do a border style of dotted. Have the width be also 2 pixels and the color be red. And again, we can also combine that with Dumbledore. So we can also combine those 3 styles, property style names, by doing just this, like the width first, color red, and then style dotted. And yeah, so now you should see how both of these columns are equal in taking up space in that single row right here. Totally forgot. My mind spaced out on like adding a new row, but the way to do that is it's just after your row that you just closed out, you create a div and repeat the same deal that you did earlier where you gave it a class of row, and remember to also close that row as well. And let's see, we can, and like, yeah, totally forgot to do that, my bad, maybe blah, blah, blah. But yeah, when you're done, just notice that, and notice that we are adding a border style while Skeleton is adding like the actual positioning and like layouts. Blah, blah, blah. And you can also start to add the different skeleton classes in like your CSS page and stuff like that, and it will start affecting like different like parts of your like grid. So just before we start doing that, just so then you can get like a better visualization of like what like a row looks like compared to like a column or a container. When I told you to create a new row like you have right here, just create like, you don't need to create like columns. We can just have this be a single like thing, like row, and just be like second row or something like that. And just to give you a quick visualization of what the rows will look like now. This is just what it looks like. It doesn't look like it's taking up the entire space because of that like really little text, but you'll start seeing it when we add all these different rules onto our css3.css file. So with our container, so like the entire like box itself that like goes around all these rows and columns, we're going to give it a 1 pixel solid blue border. We're going to give each row a 1 pixel solid red border and the columns just a color of red. So going to your css3.css, just go and we're gonna first, we're going to add our container rule, and for our border radius, it's going to be a 1 pixel red solid line I guess the order doesn't really matter all that much. I was spreading fake news. So refresh, and now you should see that because we were doing a container, class name, it's wrapping that red border all around like the different rows and such right here, and that gives you like a little visualization of what our container looks like. And afterwards we're going to create, my bad, it was supposed to be blue, but we'll just make the rows blue. For our rows, we're just going to give it a border as well, but this time in a different color, just to give that good contrast between the container, not border, row, and give that border name of the property values, 1 pixel, blue, and solid. So yeah, and now you can kind of see, and if you even like zoom in a little bit, you can kind of start seeing like the blue borders around each row, like you see right here. That's like row 1 with the hello ski and bye, and then another blue border around that second row right there. But and lastly, we're going to create a rule for our column. So right there, after row, we're going to create a rule for our columns. And this time we're going to have the font colors, we're going to change the font color to be red. And since all of our text is inside these column classes, everything should show up in red, the text now. Well, except for this one, I forgot. Yeah, because this one isn't in a column class, so this one doesn't follow the same rules as you see here with columns. So it's just these two that have like that red font color, but not this one, since we didn't put this inside like a columns thing. But yeah, so all right, so some other notes on the TLDR. Skeleton is someone else's CSS framework that we've added to our page, like we said before. And the skeleton grid uses classes like the container. Think of it like as like the table tags with our divs, the rows like the tr tags, and the columns, the td, that we can add to our div tags on our HTML positioning style. And we can only ever do that when we have that link atop our thingy right there, our like HTML page. And we can also build upon the skeleton grid like we did today with the Riddle and Dumbledore classes, like those custom CSS classes, and we can even directly like build on those classes that were introduced through skeleton, like we just did with the whole like container rows and columns and whatnot. Sorry, I feel a burp there. But yeah, here is a little visualization of like the lowdown of what we've been doing today with the skeleton framework. Here's also another way of seeing it right here. And a note about frameworks is like, again, we have to like thank all the people who worked so hard to create this framework through an attribution. And the way you can do that here is with a hyperlink to that skeleton web page. So in your not CSS, but HTML page, somewhere like in your page, just have that like little attribution saying layout by, and then that's when you have your anchor tag that links to that get skeleton page that you see right here. skeleton. And blah, 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 blah. Forgot to close out of the paragraph tag. And note, you can't, you have to make sure like to again properly attribute the skeleton framework. Failure to do so could result in a 0 on an assignment and possible academic misconduct charges. Again, because you're not properly like accrediting the work of other people who have done this amazing, again, framework for you. And for this class, you're not allowed to use other frameworks like Bootstrap. Totally feel free to do that on your own projects, but not for this class. And also don't use templates like WordPress templates for this class because that's not Gucci. And while you use skeleton for the grid layout, you're still expected to style your web page yourself for all the other things such as colors and all that jazz. Oh yes, and one quick thing before I let you go is for your projects, another great piece of documentation you can find on websites is in regards to their information on using like any iframe content. So what an iframe like tag is that you kind of just use it to display a web page within a web page. An example of that can be a YouTube video, for instance. So what you do, at least in the case of a YouTube video, is the way to do that is given that example in the slides with this great piece of art, you can go to share and embed, and it actually tells you like this is the code that to use to actually insert that YouTube video onto your web page. You can even do cool stuff, at least in the case of like a YouTube video, and have it start at a specific time. But anyways, and also you can change things like the width and height of the video. But otherwise, we're just going to copy this at face value and paste this just somewhere in our web page. Again, just quickly to give you that example of this awesome iframe tag and whatnot. So afterwards, yeah, you should see this nice little YouTube video in our, oh, it's not available, awkward. But yeah, the video should work, hopefully or not, but anyways. Anyways, so that's basically all the new content for today. So for your lab assignment, all you gotta do is add the following. So add at least 2 new rows with at least 2 new columns, kind of set you up for that earlier with the second row right here. All you got to do is add another one and add at least 2 more columns into your new rows. And within each div tag, each of those like rows or columns, you should add different custom classes and add, just edit anything regarding to padding, margins. Just a fair warning, like when you do mess with like padding and margins, it might make your like things a little bit less tabley, like less organized, but that's totally okay as long as you're experimenting with it. Backgrounds, play around with that a little bit. Colors, borders, what we've been doing, but also make sure one of these divs has a red background with white text, and then another one a blue background with yellow text, and the other 2 whatever you like, as long as they're just different. And in addition to that, when you're done, as per usual, just like upload any of your newly edited pages and image files. Sorry. Yeah, so add it to the I101, the web/I101 directory on WinSCP or CyberDoc, and then create a hyperlink on your index page that points towards your new lab under the I101 lab section, and copy paste the URL to your global like pages.iu.edu like index page into the Canvas submission box. And if there are any links that aren't there or don't work, your assignment could be counted as late. So please, like, after you're done submitting it to Canvas, make sure that the link is what it looks like that you intended it to do. Remember to back up your work onto a cloud storage device of your choice, because failure to turn in assignments because you lost work is unfortunately not a very valid excuse. So be aware of those backups, and yeah, so good luck with the assignment. Hope you had fun today, like with the nav bar and the skeleton framework. Let it, like, any of us know if you have questions, especially in regards to the skeleton framework. Personally, at least for me, I thought it took like a bit of time to get used to the formatting a little bit, and yeah, and hopefully now that you know how to read documentation, you can learn so much more new content. Be sure to check out W3 Schools for other stuff, like if you are ever curious on how to do other things and such like that. Like, the world's your oyster. So good luck with the assignment again. Have a great day, and please don't get coronavirus like yours truly. But yeah, have a great one.